So, in life, there are moments when you stop and ask yourself, how did I get here? Like, why am I standing here? Well, this is definitely one of those moments for me, and I find myself going back to beginning, back to my roots. I was born to incredible parents, amazing parents who served as doctors in the Indian Army. I was the firstborn, and as far back as I can remember, I made my parents very proud and happy 99% of the time. Okay, slight exaggeration of personal achievements are allowed from time to time. Don't you think my brother was born a few years later, and even then nothing changed for me? We were both given equal opportunities, and I want to emphasize this. I want to really emphasize this for you because I don't think a lot of people might understand that being equal might seem very normal. But where I come from, India, and a lot of developing countries around the world, more often than not, this is an exception. It's actually a privilege. My first experience of the glaring disparity between boys and girls came at a very, very young age. I grew up in a middle-class family with extremely philanthropic parents who constantly reminded me that my brother how lucky we were and how giving back to those who were less fortunate was not a choice. It was a way of life. Simple. I was 7 or 8 years old when my parents started talking me on these visits in traveling clinic to developing communities around and villages around the city that we lived in, Baltimore. Really, we were packed into this ambulance and my parents were provided free medical care to people who couldn't afford it. My job at the age of 8 was assistant pharmacist. So, I would count all the medicines, put them in an envelope and give it out to patients, and I really took my job very seriously. But the more I went on these expeditions, the more I began to notice that simplest things that distinguished a boy from a girl or a man from a woman. For example, girls were pulled out of school when they hit puberty because they were considered ready for marriage and babies. That's 12 and 13 while boys still enjoyed their childhood. Our basic human rights such as health care were denied just because they were women. Let's call this whole experience trigger number 1 for me. Last forward a few years and many triggers in between. Like a producer-director, for example, early on in my career, I must have been about 18 or 19 telling me that if I didn't agree to the ridiculous term or painfully low salary in his movie, that he would just replace me because girls are replaceable in the entertainment business. But I think what really moved the needle for me and ultimately led me to create the Foundation for Health and Education around the same time, partner with UNICEF, was an encounter with my housekeeper's daughter about 12 years ago. I came home from set early one day and she was sitting in my library reading a book, and she must have been 8 or 9 years old, and I knew she loved reading. So I asked her, I was like, it's weekday. Why aren't you in school? And she said, oh, I don't go to school anymore. So I went and asked her mother, and I said, why isn't she in school? And her mom said that her family couldn't afford to send her and her brothers to school, so they chose the boys. The reason she would eventually get married and it would be a waste of money. I was completely blown and it shook me to my core. Eventually, I decided to cover the cost of her education so that he could continue to learn because education is a basic human right. thanks and a huge necessity, especially today. From the point on, I was determined to make a difference in as many children's lives as I could in whatever big or small way that I could contribute. There's a really beautiful quote that I read recently, and I think it's absolutely appropriate to explain what I'm trying to say today. The hand that rocks the cradle, the procreator, the mother of tomorrow. A woman shapes the destiny of civilization, such as the tragic irony of fate that a beautiful creation such as a girl child is today one of the greatest concerns facing humanity. Girls have the power of change the world. It is a fact, and yet today girls are more likely than boys never to set foot in a classroom. Despite all the efforts and progress made over the last 2 decades, more than I am just gonna give you a stat, more than 15 million girls of primary school age will never learn how to read or write compared to 10 million boys primary school. It's the beginning of our future. Over the last 11 years, I have witnessed firsthand the incredible work that UNICEF does for children around the world, especially victims and survivors of child marriage, displacement, war, sexual violence. But there is still so much work to do, and for me that is the fuel to my fire. The reason I am so committed to this cause, and that is where my passion stems from, because I know that a girl's education not just empowers families but communities and economics a result of her education. We all do better. It's just as simple as that, as entertainers and influencers sitting in this room. I feel that is our social responsibility to be for the voiceless, which is why I applaud each and every woman in this room for being such a badass, for using your platform and your voice to contribute to change, and for ensuring that there is not even one lost generation as long as we are alive.
Life does not always go in our favor. Sometimes it brings us happiness, and many times it brings us pain. It takes days or months or sometimes years to heal emotionally. If you think that all you need is some time to get over something hurtful, trust me that you are not the only one. If we look around, there are thousands of people who are struggling with difficulties of the past. When we get hurt emotionally, it looks like time has stopped and the world has ended. In reality, these wounds hurt, and damages make us stronger than we were before. It's just like how smooth and calm oceans or rivers can't make you a skilled sailor. Similarly, hard times make you a strong person. People always change after being hurt. All you need is to give yourself time to heal, and you will find yourself a completely different person. Being alone does not mean you're lonely. You cannot be lonely if you like the person you're alone with. Don't try to force yourself to get into a relationship in order to avoid being alone. It is much better to have nobody in your life than to have someone who is half there or doesn't want to be there. The sun is alone too, but still, it shines. Some people who are emotionally hurt try to move to the next relationship because they think that this would be the better way to forget the old problem. But actually, this isn't the case. Instead, you only deepen the wound even more. Wounds don't heal the way we want them to. Actually, they heal the way they need to. It takes time for wounds to fade into scars. It takes time for the process of healing to take place. If you have a wound on your body and you don't stop touching it, it means that you are going to make it worse, and the healing process will become slower and slower. On the other hand, your wound will be healed much faster if you give time to the healing process. We can use this example for emotional trauma as well, when we try to distract ourselves from the actual problems. Sometimes we get to the point where we don't want to face ourselves and say, I'm stepping off the temporary healing boat. Actually, running away from the problems only increases the distance to the solution. The fact is, you cannot run away from the truth. One day or another, the truth will find you. Now, it's time to bear the situation, no matter how bad it is. Let the process of healing work and trust your God. He will certainly bring pleasure and happiness to your life. When you face any problem in your life, you will definitely get ease after it, and that's the part of life. Therefore, when you are emotionally hurt, just sit and think in your mind that ease is coming soon. Believe me, even in the worst situation, your heart will be totally satisfied, and there will be a smile on your face. Sometimes it happens in our lives that the person we love the most leaves us without thinking even a single time that his or her absence will hurt us a lot. We start to think like our life will be no more. But as time passes, we slowly recover from the trauma and see a new life ahead. Let me tell you one thing, life is like riding a motorbike. If you want to maintain balance, you have to keep going. The past is like using your rearview mirror in the car. It's good to glance back and see how far you've come, but if you stare too long, you keep crashing. When someone you love the most decides to leave you for good, you have to let them, no matter how much you don't want them to. There are many things in our lives that are not in our control. Even if we have the strength to fight for them, we have to accept the cold, harsh truth that the person you can't live without actually can live without you. So, instead of crying and being deeply saddened, think that it might be a chance for you to find someone that really appreciates your present. One thing we all have experienced in life is that whenever we get hurt, we try to put alcohol or a bandage on it. At first, it burns a little bit, but after some time, you feel that your wound is healing. So, we have to understand the fact that God has made a cycle for everything. At the end, stop wasting time thinking all night about the things you could have done better. You have done nothing wrong. Sometimes people change without a reason. Remember, there are billions of people in the world, and the person who is left was not the last person ever. You will find someone better, so cheer up. Feel happy about yourself. God is with us, so don't worry and have patience.
The people who became the most successful in our society are people who broke the rules. You know, there was no presidents for 24-hour news cycles until Ted Turner did it. There's so many people who got out of the box. Look at Apple and the birth of the whole notion of Apple, or Nike, I talk about in the book, and the birthing of that corporation, how they did something with the tennis shoe that had never been done before. If you only base your decisions on empirical data, you can only repeat what somebody else already did. If you follow your instincts and your own God-given creativity, we can go where we have not been before. Be strong and very courageous. Be strong and very courageous. Be strong and be of good courage. Be strong and possess the land. Because God knows that for what you're going to do, it is not by outer strength. You understand? You understand. See, help me preach this thing this morning, girl. It's inner strength. So my fourth point is you got to have inner strength for this fight. It's not your outer strength. It's not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, saith the Lord. So you got to have that gut strength, that belly strength, that devil-defying come hell or high water strength, that roll me out in front of them and I'll preach from a chair strength. That tenacity to take a licking and keep on ticking. That inner strength that when I can't do as I would, I'm going to do as I can, but I'm not going to stop doing. To the best of my ability, I'm going to stretch and go. Hallelujah! Be strong! Strong. 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 I am afraid that too many times we have put so much focus on teaching you to be good seed that we haven't taught you the power of good soil. And so when we come to soil issues, the seed ignores the soil. We flick the channel. That has nothing to do with me. We close our eyes because we have been taught to be good seed, but we have not been taught to pay attention to soil. And yet the Bible is clear. Jesus says the sower went forth sowing seed. And some fell by the wayside. Some fell amongst rocks. Some fell amongst thorns. The whole text is about environment. Look at you and look at your environment. Have you been positioned to flourish? Positioning has a lot to do with flourishing. To be in an environment, in a family that supports you. My sister and I were talking the other day. I was telling her what an amazing person she is, that all of our lives together and all the things that God did in my life, not once in all of the years that I've known her, and she was there when Mama had me, have I ever known her to be jealous of me. Not once, not ever. She has always been my cheerleader and my greatest fan. And she said, how could I be jealous of you? You're my brother. I said, a lot of people have siblings that hate them, that are jealous of them, that hope they choke. And some of my development has to be that God planted me in an environment of people that supported me. My brother, my sister, my mother, my father, they all supported me. You can have good seed, but if you've been in bad soil, people who hated you, environments that denied you, education that underserved you, communities that limited you, mentalities that poisoned you. Oh, do you hear what I'm saying? If your soil wasn't right, it doesn't mean that you're not right, but if your soil wasn't right, it's going to affect how you root and how you grow. And you might grow a little bit. The Bible says you can grow for a while, but then the thorns will choke you out, or the rocks will not have enough soil for your roots to grow. Are you blaming God for something you ought to be blaming the soil for?
Several years ago, when I was a director, I was hired under a change mandate. I remember showing up as this new whippersnapper full of ideas that I was going to change and transform the culture in one quick fell swoop. Showing up to that meeting with my agenda and my operations and my ideas, oh, what a train wreck and a colossal debacle that was. I had feedback from this area, I had pushback from this area, I had concerns and questions raised from this person. I interpreted all of that as an indictment about my leadership. And in fact, it wasn't. It was quite the opposite. I remember distinctly feeling like I was sitting on the bottom of a hill, and all of this feedback was like a giant snowball on the top of that hill that would just kept picking up momentum, and it would get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there I was at the bottom of the hill trying to hold it back, and boom, ran over. I went to my mentor to ask for some advice. And he said to me, Ivan, never go to a meeting with an idea that you already don't know the outcome of. In fact, he said, go slow to go fast. I remember hearing that. Go slow to go fast. What he meant by taking the time to find out the people who are most invested in what you're trying to share, who have the most to gain or lose, or whose jobs may be impacted the most, and being intentional and deliberate in hearing their feedback. Take moments to address their concerns, not as a part of an exercise that you read in a book, but out of caring and really wanting to do what's best for the organization. When you finish that process with that individual, take the time now to go to the next person and repeat this process over and over again. When you approach it with this real intentional meaning and caring to find the best possible solution, then you have everybody on your bus. Then when you come back together and you bring the group together and people can hear their thoughts and their ideas and their feedback expressed in your new process, they are more willing to follow. They are more inspired. They are more invested in creating sustainable and lasting change. If you can go slow to go fast, if you can take the time to do this work beforehand, you will drive a successful change mandate.
You are the sum total of all of the choices that you've made up until now. And anything about yourself or your life that you don't like or isn't working or isn't mobilizing you is to be looked at in terms of, can I grow? Rather than, why did I do it, or isn't this wrong? See, the two ways to motivate yourself are deficiency motivation, which says, where I am I don't like. I don't like what I've done. I don't like the fact that I can't do this well or I can't do that well. So I will list these things in my own repertoire, and then I will be constantly trying to repair those deficiencies, always assuming that I'm deficient, that there's something wrong with me, and I'm trying to fix it. And when you do that, you spend your whole life doing that. And you never arrive, because your life becomes a series of trying to get someplace else. And it is, if you follow that, if you live that, if you behave that, then what happens to you is you become a person who will always suffer from this disease called more. You always have to have more. Because whenever you are getting where you want to go, let's say you want $100,000 in the bank, and you work, and you struggle, and you deny yourself, and you do all of those things, and you finally you get there, and here you are, you got $100,000 in the bank. All of this stuff over here is, of course, your life, and that is all you know. That's what you know how to, that's how you are. That is your being. That is your way of being. So that when you do get here, what you will do is say, this is not enough. A no-limit person is never operating from deficiency or from lack in their life. They're never saying, I don't have enough. You see, you're never going to get enough. You already are everything. You're everything that you need. Think of it for just a moment. Everything that you need to have total bliss, perfection of your life, you already are. You already have it. You came into this world with nothing. That's how you're going out. And the time that you have here, what you have is your uniqueness, your specialness, and you don't need anything else. Now think on this. If you don't know how to appreciate what you have and where you are in your life, you don't need anything else. Because if you do get something else, you won't know how to appreciate that either. You'll just want more. Or you'll want it to be different. Or you'll want it to be the way it used to be. Or you'll want someone else to be the way you think they should be. Successful people or no-limit people or self-actualizing people or inner-directed people, whatever labels that have been put on them by great thinkers and philosophers and therapists and people that have looked at human beings, these kinds of people are people who always have enough. There are some people, if you invite them over and you say, I'd like you to come over tonight, and I'd like you to stay over if you can, instead of having to drive back. And they'll say, well, can you stay? And I say, well, I don't know if I can stay or not. Well, you could sleep on the cot. Oh, no, I could never sleep on the cot. I can't sleep on cots. I got a sciatica, don't you know that I have back pain and cots? No, that's out of the question. I couldn't sleep on a cot. And what about breakfast? Well, we don't have any food, but we have some old grapefruit that are in the refrigerator. They have a few spots on them. Oh no, I could never eat grapefruit. And spots? No thanks. I can't eat grapefruit spots. I just couldn't do that. And these are people who never have enough. They are not able to be flexible and to change.